24 hours from now, President Obama will probably be about one applause line and one "you lie" into his first official State of the Union address. The president's senior advisor, David Axelrod, recently said that he told the president around the time he was inaugurated that 1 year later, i.e. now, he'd be operating with worse approval numbers and in a worse political climate because of the disastrous economy in freefall, which Obama's presidency was starting with. Mr. Axelrod was right, of course. These are tough political times for the party in power. But honestly, we didn't end up having a second Great Depression, even though a lot of people thought we were going to. And what's happened to the economy since Obama has been president isn't exactly a record to run from. Here's GDP, the whole gross domestic product in the last 3 quarters of the Bush administration. I guess that's the last 4 quarters of the Bush administration. Grim, right? Well, here's the first 3 quarters once President Obama took office. See that at the end there? That's called a growing economy. And making that out of what the last guy handed off to you is not quite loaves into fishes, but you get the idea. On the jobs front, even when an economy improves, jobs improve later. And the unemployment rate right now is really, really horribly high. But again, look at the trend here. When President Bush left office, the job loss graph looked like an animation flip book of something being hurled off a cliff. Since President Obama took office, the rate of job losses is slowing. Trend, right direction. In terms of economic policies, President Obama signed into law a stimulus a little less than a year ago. Even as Republicans complain about it, economists, by and large, say it worked. Individual economists who are politically notable, like Mark Zandi, who advised John McCain's campaign against Obama, say that stimulus worked and we need another one. USA Today surveyed 50 economists on the stimulus yesterday. The verdict? It's held down the unemployment rate and saved, in their median estimate, 1.2 million jobs. Well, then there's the banking system bailout. While politically toxic, it does seem to have preserved the existence of a banking sector in the United States and to have averted the aforementioned Second Great Depression. And by the way, it earned money for taxpayers. The Federal Reserve actually turned a $52 billion profit last year. That's return on the bailout money. And in order to recoup the rest of the money that we gave the banks, President Obama has proposed a bank fee. The big political bonus for the president on that one is that the Republicans are against the bank fee. Republicans are siding with the banks against paying back the bailout money to the taxpayers. That is such a political gift to Democrats, it should have come with wrapping paper on it and a ribbon tied around it. Mr. Obama's other bailout was, of course, for the auto industry. Again, we still have an auto industry in this country, which is handy and was not necessarily going to happen on its own. General Motors announced yesterday that they're about ready to pay back their bailout money as well. The auto industry was also helped by Obama's Cash for Clunkers program. Ford, which didn't even get bailout money, is expected to announce big 2009 profits next week. Today, Ford announced that they're adding 1,200 new jobs to a plant in Illinois. President Obama's next stride on economic issues? Wall Street reform, which again happens to be a great political issue for Democrats, given that Republicans are on the pro-Wall Street, anti-populist side of this. Republicans are against President Obama's Consumer Financial Protection Agency, which means in political speak that they are pro-fine print and hidden credit card fees. You can put a ribbon on that one, too. Republicans are even against Mr. Obama's new series of micro-targeted, Clinton-esque, middle-class family tax cuts. You know, no one would wish this economy on any president right now, but given what he's done with what he had to work with, given the results of this year's governing compared with, say, the last guy, given the demonstrable success of this president's biggest economic policy decisions of the past year, even as a lot of those decisions were politically tough to take, given that his new policy suggestions have boxed in Republicans to make them take incredibly toxic stances that are likely to bum out their own constituents and to disgust moderates, and that those same Obama proposals are likely to inspire a little faith in Obama on the left and maybe therefore close the enthusiasm gap between these two political parties and their bases. Given all of that, given everything he's got going for him heading into the State of the Union, the president has decided to surrender, to give up. Democrats have marched all the way down the field to the 1-yard line, and instead of fighting their way into the end zone, they have decided to punt. from the one. They have decided to give the ball to the other team instead of trying to score. President Obama tomorrow night is expected to announce a massive spending freeze, thereby ceding to Republicans all of the economic political turf they ever wanted. Evidence today by conservative Democratic Senator Evan Bayh holding a celebratory press conference about the spending freeze with John McCain, the man who lost the presidential election to Barack Obama, proposing this idea.
Well, how about a spending freeze on everything but defense, veteran affairs, and entitlement programs?
Spending freeze?
I think we ought to seriously consider, with the exceptions of caring for our veterans, national defense, and several other vital issues.
Would you go for that?
Well, the problem with a spending freeze is you're using a hatchet where you need a scalpel.
President Obama wins election, then John McCain anointed president by Democrats. Nobel Prize-winning economist Paul Krugman today called the spending freeze, quote, appalling on every level. It's bad economics, depressing demand when the economy is still suffering from mass unemployment. It's bad long-run fiscal policy, and it's a betrayal of everything Obama's supporters thought they were working for. Just like that, Obama has embraced and validated the Republican worldview and embraced the policy ideas of the man he defeated in 2008. Blogging at The Economist today, Ryan Event writing, quote, through bad times and good times for the president, there was one word I never associated with him and his approach to the challenges facing the country. Gimmick. But this is a bright, shining gimmick that advertises a lack of seriousness to both near-term economic weakness and long-run budget problems. This is decidedly not what is needed right now. The Washington Post, in a reported article, not even an op-ed today, describing the spending freeze as a political concession that could dramatically curtail Obama's legislative ambitions while barely denting the deficit. Less than 24 hours from this moment, President Obama will be in the process of punting from the 1-yard line, not attacking the real long-term deficit, doing short-term harm to the economy by taking money out of it at a time when government spending is some of the only spending we've got, and conceding to Republicans their economically inane assertion that the way to tackle deficits is by ignoring entitlements and health care costs and defense spending and gasp taxes, and instead by monkeying around with the 1/8 sliver of the budget that makes for good right-wing political attack ads. Awesome. Joining us now is James Galbraith, professor of economics at the University of Texas. Professor Galbraith, thanks very much for your time tonight. It's nice to have you here.
Good to be with you.
Tomorrow night, President Obama is expected to announce this 3-year discretionary spending freeze. In your view, is there a real economic justification for this?
No, there's not. It's basically a symbolic gesture. It's, as you said, going to affect a very small part of the budget. I think what it reflects is the same sort of problem of judgment about the course of the economy that the administration made a year ago when they assumed that a recovery would happen, that the unemployment rate would peak at 8%, and that they would therefore be able to get away with a stimulus which, although it was useful, as you've said, was too small to really be felt as having made a decisive impact on the trajectory of the economy. If we got a very strong recovery in 2010, then nobody would remember that he'd imposed a spending freeze that was taking effect in 2011. The problem is, it's, I think, rather unlikely that that will happen, and it's very poor economic judgment to proceed as though you could be confident it was going to happen. And so I think he's building in trouble for the future on the economic front. The other question I would raise is, what problem is this supposed to solve? When you think about, and this is, I think, relates to the problem of the supposed problem of the deficit in a larger sense. When you ask what issue is being addressed here, the question is always, will the federal government be able to borrow for the long term at a reasonable interest rate? That's the only real economic issue that's posed by the deficit. But that long-term interest rate isn't a state secret. It's something you can look up in the morning paper. The 20-year rate on federal bonds is only less than 4.4% today. It's been falling sharply in the last couple of days. And so you have to ask, is there any serious economic argument for this gesture? The answer to that question is no, there's not.
As somebody who also understands the politics of economic issues as well and how these things are handled in the political arena, do you think that this decision should be viewed as the White House ceding the Republican Party ground on economic policy? In terms of its value as a symbolic policy, is it ceding Republican ground?
Well, I think it's working on a very interesting political theory, which is that if you throw some red meat in the water, the sharks will feed quietly and leave the swimmers alone. And it may be that the budget director felt that by giving them a little spending freeze on discretionary spending, he would get less pressure on the really serious question, which is the attack coming through the so-called bipartisan commission, the Conrad Gregg Commission, that is coming against Social Security and Medicare. And I know they want to defend Social Security and Medicare. We all should want to defend Social Security and Medicare. But by conceding the case, which doesn't need to be conceded, that we're